What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to do a very interesting ranking video. I was thinking about it a few days ago and thought, I don't think I've ever seen it before, mainly because it's just highly specific. So we're going to rank the movies, but we're ranking them based off Ghostface and the intimidation of Ghostface. So what I want to do is I want to look at the way that people were killed, and I want to look at phone calls. So we're specifically looking really at the person wearing the mask, right? So like the stunt double, how they're doing things, but then also Roger, primarily Roger. Over the next, couple of weeks, couple of months, I do want to do like ranking every single phone call. We're going to rank every single death in the entire Scream franchise. So I got some really big, long, that's going to take some work, rankings to do. Okay, so let's just jump in. I want to hear your rankings below. Again, remember the criteria. It's based off of what they're doing in the mask, not the reveal, just the mask. So kills, chases, failures in that sense, and then also Roger, so like Ghostface calling people. So we're going to start with number 6, and that's going to be Scream 3. Now, Scream 3, up and down, and, I have a new appreciation. I've talked about this before. Like, I like 3, I think, more now than I ever have before. With that being said, I'm not unwilling to talk about, the weaknesses. I'm not afraid of the Twitter community that will go after people who don't like Scream 3. No, again, I like Scream 3, but some of the weaknesses of that movie are actually the kills, right? The kills were extremely weak. Now, the time period, the Columbine stuff, like, I get why, if that is the reason why they had to, like, tone stuff down, I understand it. But the kills are really, really weak. So in terms of them, I'm going to stop using that K word as many times in this video as well. The eliminations that happen in that movie, there's really none to write home about that super, super stand out. Again, you'll probably see that when we do like the ranking video of these kills. These ones are probably going to be towards the bottom. In terms of the intimidation factor of Ghostface, I'd like to give a couple, I guess, mentions. Sometimes on the phone, like, getting Sydney to go to the mansion at the end and kind of the requirements, what she had to do, like, that was solid. But I would say the biggest thing is probably on the film set of, the house and all that. That was probably like peak Scream 3, maybe one of the better moments, in the entire trilogy. But also, okay, well, number one, it kind of falls apart if you only think there's one killer, all right? Because really, it's impossible for Roman on his own to have been doing that entire thing, to have been chasing Sydney, to then get under like the tarp thing, right? Like, impossible, absolutely impossible. So if you can't think about it too hard, because it really starts to break apart. But the mental manipulation that was done on her in regards to her mom, now some of that was kind of organically just her, but some of it in that sequence was Ghostface. So in terms of like doing something a little bit different to the victim than really what's ever been done before, I would give a lot of credit for it. So that it's one of my favorite sequences really in the entire franchise. But considering, again, the criteria that we're going based off of, it's one strong moment and a lot of really weaker moments. Okay, number 5, I'm actually going to say Scream 6. So, when I've been ranking the beginnings and the endings and all this stuff, 6 normally is like in the middle, right around the middle, like 3. This one's 5, so it's a little bit lower, I'd say, overall. Okay, so I want to give points because of the Annika thing, okay? And maybe, like, if you want to say the very beginning, like, with Jason and all that stuff, I suppose, in terms of, like, the brutalness, right? So, again, you're looking at Ghostface and what he's doing. Oh, the Annika thing, I mean, stabbing her, ripping her up, and then throwing her with, with the ladder, that's quite something. So that gets a lot of points. But if you think about it, and I guess maybe, like, getting Gale to the brink of death, so the intimidation factor that you could get an OG character, and that phone call is, spectacular. It's one of the best phone calls, I think, in the series. And the chase and the fight, it's got all the right notes of tension and all that stuff. But beyond, again, its strengths. So as you'll see, like, as we move up this rankings, it becomes more consistent. Whereas in, the bottom level here with Scream 3 and now Scream 6, look, like, the kills, well, there are none. Like, there's very few kills in this movie. You can't say Chad. Like, that's a really cool sequence, but is it all that intimidating when you live? So, like, Chad made it. Gale made it. Now, you can give the intimidation factor where it's like, okay, they almost got beat. The Chad thing, as I've said, I like the sequence. But, like, they lost if that was Ethan. If Ethan was, like, the first one chasing, he squarely lost. Now, he went up against 3 of them, but without the other one, so without, Quinn kind of coming in last second, it would have been game over. So they weren't really all that intimidating. You think of phone calls. I mean, like Roger did so well. But you also have to think like in the beginning of the movie, he's not playing them. I guess the hot and cold game that they're doing, probably is Detective Bailey, when you're on the phone with Sam. But like, I think the best phone call conversation in that whole movie is the ending when Sam is Ghostface calling. So I'm not going to count that because that's not, you know what I mean? I'll count that in like calls, but I'm not going to count that in intimidation for Bailey or Quinn or Ethan. So 6 is, a lot of people have problems with like the reveal in 6 and the killers in 6. And I think that's kind of reflected here. I don't really think they were all that intimidating except for, I mean, their peaks were extremely good, but beyond that, very inconsistent. Number 4, I'm going to go Scream 5. And now we're getting up a little bit more in terms of consistency. Kills had, a little consistency to them. Most times they succeeded. The Tara thing, right? Maybe you would hold that kind of against it because very intimidating. Like the opening of 5 is extremely good. Again, it's the best kind of copycat of 1 I think you could possibly do. Like, obviously there's a lot of inspiration drawn, so you can't necessarily call it original, but it was really, really good. And that Ghostface was intimidating. Now you're going after like a 5'1", like 17, 18-year-old. So it's not like the hardest thing in the world you would think. And they did not succeed, but that's because she called the cops, right? And then, in the hospital, I mean, Tara had some sort of like plot armor, right? In that movie, just like Chad has kind of had his entire life. They have these plot armors where Ghostface is not allowed to do major damage. So you have to kind of take that away. There was the hospital, attack against Sam. But, this is the Ghostface that killed Dewey. So intimidation-wise, I mean, I guess they took out people. You have Amber taking out Liv and Dewey dying. Wes's death, I thought, was actually really, really good. Obviously, how they did the deaths, people looked at as repetitive, but I think this Ghostface was intimidating, and Ghostface, like plural, but I'm just kind of saying one at a time. I think this Ghostface was intimidating. I think the phone calls were pretty unique, talking to Judy on the phone, driving home. I thought that was really, really cool as well. So this one I think is better. It's not like over the top. It's not this Ghostface is not something different, right? I think we're going to get that as we keep going up the ranking. At number 3, I'm going to say Scream 2. So these last several were actually kind of nuts. I think you're going to be surprised what I put, for 2 and 1. It's probably not what you think. So I'm going to put Scream 2 here. And, I think back to Scream 2, and there's a couple moments that hurt it. One of it kind of like classically gets almost mocked. I don't mind it, but I will hold it against it because of my criteria. And really the first chase that Sydney has in this movie where Ghostface, flops over like a chair or something. And, a lot of people will mock that. I mean, look, if you have a Ghostface mask on, it is pretty hard to see. You're running at fast speeds. You have to make like these turns and you're not going to be able, you don't have peripheral vision. It's hard. So, it's a little goofy, but at the end of the day, it's also realistic. And honestly, when I think of Scream 2, I mean, that's not like the first thing I think of. You can think of the chase with Cece. You can think of the chase with Gail, which I think is an excellent just thing in general. You think of, and this is the first thing, like the big thing that came to my mind where I was like, okay, is Scream 2 going to be lower on this list or higher? So when the car crashes, right? Now, like Ghostface is unconscious, right? But at the same time, why is that scene so tense? Because in that beautifully crafted moment, whoever, if Kevin wrote that or if Wes had any say into it, I mean, that was just a phenomenal, right, scene just in general. But if he wakes up and they're, on top of him, like trying to go through the window, they're screwed. So although Ghostface isn't literally active in that moment, it's the scene and it's the fact that if he were to awaken, they're done for. And that, in my opinion, like that's a good Ghostface, right? It's a very powerful Ghostface. Obviously, Randy dies in the phone call, kind of like mocking him. Like this is Ghostface, pretty darn solid. I mean, they were riding high off of Scream 1. I think they did really, really well here. Whether it be phone calls, I think they were all really, really good. Or some of them were short. Like there were some short phone calls here, but when they did it well, like longer ones, they did fantastic. And then, the kills, not really messing around, little goofiness, but I mean, very little in the grand scheme of things. So this one I think deserves its spot. Number 2, it's going to be Scream 1. So I know this is not like a mocking thing. I know some people, very, very few people, when I do these rankings, they'll say they're tired of seeing like Scream 1 at the top of every, because it kind of seems like unfair. It seems like, you're going in with a bias that Scream 1 needs to be there. It's never how I've done it. Okay, just trying to throw it out there. But in this very specific criteria, Scream 1 to me is actually number 2, and Scream 4 is number 1, and we will get there. But let's talk about Scream 1. It's incredible, right? And Ghostface. Now, the thing with this is, I think they're actually kind of highs and kind of lows. I think because you have Matthew Lillard, right, there is going to be a little bit of goofiness. And I think when you watch it, again, you don't see that, at least I don't, as the most intimidating group, like, of all time. And that's why I actually put Scream 4 first, right? But the phone calls, Billy is in such control. So, like, if you're going kind of chronologically, throughout the movie, you open it up, the phone call obviously starts it all. It's probably the best phone call of the entire franchise, and there's a reason for it. But one of the reasons for this criteria is he's in control. He's in control the whole time, and although he kind of slips up, with the, he can see her, right? Or, I want to know who I'm looking at. That is, it's written in such a great way where I guess, like, he probably slipped up, and that's, like, the reasoning, but maybe he did that for fun, right? But he's just so in control. Now, in terms of the chases and eliminating people, this Ghostface is not always successful, right? Like, when they go after Sydney, oftentimes not successful. But it's the first time you're, like, getting into this character. It's the first time you're, like, seeing the mask. And there are some times where they're very much in control. I think to, this picture behind me with Tatum, right? But I also think to, like, when Sydney gets in the car and Ghostface, does the keys to the door. It's like it's a mocking kind of point of view, right? But it's like, I'm in control and I'm going to get you. And then he drops, and then all of a sudden the locks start to pop up. A controlled Ghostface, one that really is intimidating. And you could even then say, like, I haven't really done this, right? This isn't part of the criteria, but when they reveal themselves, I mean, like Billy and Stu, although again, like, Stu is so off the walls, for the most part, at least for the first, like, half of their little monologue, very in control. Very in control. They're kind of always in control in that time, but they seem like extra, where, like, everything kind of worked perfectly for them, at the end of the day, of Sydney trusting Billy and all that. But, at the end of the day, that's not what makes this criteria work. That's not what makes it on this list, but that's why it's number 2. And then number 1, I mean, the thing with Scream 4 is it's just so, like nuts. You think of Scream 6 and Ghostface saying, I'm something different, and then that didn't appear in the movie, but you think about that saying in the trailer. And, for 4, it is easily, like, the oddest. Like, it's, okay, like, when you think back to the Scream franchise, you think of 1 through 3, and you're going to think of 5 through 7, right? Because they're both trilogies. And 4 really is that odd child, and the only thing that really makes it out of it is Kirby. Of course, we have great memories with it, and so many people put Jill, including myself, very, very highly, like, on the Ghostface rankings, but it is that odd child that you don't, always think about, which is pretty sad. But no, you love it. You love that child, but they're just a little bit odd, right? But no, Scream 4, Roger's, portrayal of the voice and all that stuff, he does it's such a good job. I don't know if it's my favorite version, but it's definitely the most different. Like, when you think about it, it was in, his voice had aged, which is, his voice is aged now, like in 5 and 6. You can tell, obviously, his voice has changed a bit from 1 through 3, but it changed in 4 as well, right? Like, it changed in 4, then it changed in 5. But, like, this Ghostface is just it's talking about, like, the slitting the eyeballs and, like, all of this, like, very over the top, but it kind of works. Like, it kind of works. So, in terms of phone calls, this was a Ghostface that was really, like, pushy on Sydney, really with the idea of, like, everyone around you dies. Like, this is what's going to happen, right? Like, you can't stay out of this, and everybody around you is just kind of screwed now. So you have that angle. Ghostface, with some of the one-liners, which is incredible. And then the kills. You had people being thrown from balconies or like the 5th floor of a parking garage. You had the Olivia death, which was absolutely nuts. Even, like, the Charlie thing and then eventually Kirby. Like, yeah, this movie got pretty real. And even Jill being psychotic, at the end, again, that doesn't count. But I think in terms of, like, intimidation factor, rather early on in this movie, you got the sense that the kills were kind of going to be, like, over the top, almost on purpose, right? Maybe almost making fun of that kind of idea in horror movies or whatever with the gore. Maybe not, maybe just because they felt like it. But you got that sense, like, immediately. And then, Roger with the calls, I think is quite, again, it's maybe not better than Scream 1, but it's a step up in terms of like we're really trying to like go after them, in this film. So there you go. There's my rankings. Let me know yours in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.